Hey, good morning, everybody. This is Jennifer with Yoga for Caregivers, and I am so excited to share this workshop with everybody this morning. I have a really special guest who I just recently connected with here, Ligia Gomez. And Ligia has worked in social work and public health for almost 20 years. She found herself experiencing high levels of stress, compassion fatigue, she was overextending, and she had some related GI issues, all of which were impacting her ability to do the work she loves and nurture the relationships that are important to her. Through the synergistic effects of yoga, meditation, and mindfulness practices, Ligia has started the journey towards identifying unhealthy patterns of behavior, honoring her limits, and cultivating balance in all aspects of her life. We are just so thrilled to have Ligia here, who's a part of the St. Petersburg yoga team of brain body life coaches. And St. Petersburg Yoga is here in Tampa Bay, Florida, and has been offering yoga, meditation, and mindfulness to individuals, groups, workplaces for over 30 years. And so we're super excited to have her as a guest. She's going to be speaking to us about how to slow things down when there's so much to do, and exploring some practical strategies for creating mindful pauses throughout your day. With just a couple minutes of stillness, we can encourage self-awareness and allow you to recognize your needs and give the opportunity to introduce stress-relieving breath and body techniques, which is going to be so helpful for the caregiving community. So I'd like to welcome Ligia and turn this over to her.
Great. Jennifer, thank you so much for that introduction. Thank you for coordinating such an important event and such an important initiative in terms of finding extra ways of supporting folks who are in that caregiving role. So Jennifer shared a little bit about me. Yes, background in human services, social services. And part of my reality right now is I'm a long distance caregiver for my father, who is experiencing dementia and lives in Colombia, which is where I'm from originally. So this topic is not just interesting to me at a theoretical level, but at a very personal level. And what I found over the past few years is that there's tools of mindfulness and yoga and meditation that have been really transformative for me in terms of having a more balanced sense of compassion. And what I mean by that is being able to balance the attention and the energy and the effort that I dedicate towards others with the energy and attention and effort that I dedicate to myself. And that is very much a work in progress and will likely be a lifetime work in progress. But that's something that's really important to me in my life and something I'm very passionate in helping others with. So what's the reality for us as caregivers, right? And that role is very, very wide, right? It can involve many, many of us in many different circumstances. But some of the things that many of us can relate to in that role, there's a lot coming in for us. What I mean by that is there's different providers that we're working with. There's care plans, there's appointments, there's medications. There's a lot of information and data that we're having to take in and we're having to keep in our brain and manage and coordinate. And that's a lot of work. And for the most part, our attention tends to be directed outwardly. We're attending to our loved one, we're anticipating their needs, we're trying to manage what are sometimes unpredictable moods and behaviors. And we're really working hard on creating an environment of ease and comfort, many times in the midst of uncertainty and crisis. So this is a lot to manage. And it leaves very little time, bandwidth, energy, and even motivation to attend to self. And within this reality, what we sometimes view as self-care, and many times loving friends and caring people recommend to us as self-care, seems unattainable. When am I going to go to that support group? When am I going to go to that yoga class? When am I going to get that massage? When am I going to go for that walk, right? These are all great ideas, and they do indeed form part of self-care, but sometimes they just don't seem within reach for us. So what I wanted to talk about today was how we can start building towards self-care with really small steps. So starting really micro, really minuscule, and seeing if that can be a starting point for us. So I want to talk today about a very short practice, but very powerful practice. And I want us to actually experience it together, and then we can unpack it a little bit and discuss it a little bit. Okay? So what I'm going to ask you all to do is right where you are, right in your seat, come to have your feet planted on the ground and support it in your seated position. So it doesn't have to be a very rigid position or very strict, but just feeling like you're holding yourself up here. Your hands can rest on your lap. And you can close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing that, or bring your gaze down, maybe towards a point in front of you. So we're just pausing for this moment. And I just want you to first check in with your body. What do you feel in your body right now? What sensations are there? Is there tension? Is there pressure? Is there discomfort? We don't need to tell a story about why we're feeling that way, or explain it, or try to fix it. We're just trying to notice what's here right now. Now I want you to notice what your breath is like. You might want or have the urge to change it or manipulate it. Try to just follow your breathing pattern. What's the quality of the breath? What's the depth? What's the pace? What's your breathing like right now? Okay, next check-in is with your headspace. I want you to observe and kind of get a snapshot of what kind of thoughts are up there right now. What images, maybe there's memories, maybe worries, maybe plans. Just get a sense of what's occupying the brain right now. Okay, everyone, when you feel ready, go ahead and open your eyes and let's come back to the conversation. So that mindful pause was all of about a minute and a half. Minute and a half. What's our intention here? So let's talk about what we're trying to do in a mindful pause like this one. And I want to talk about 3 big things that we're trying to do here. One is it's serving as a release valve. This opportunity for a mini release for the tension, the stress, the overwhelmedness that tends to build up in the day for us, especially on those really busy days, lots of appointments, lots of the people that we're talking to, or maybe a heightened condition with the loved one that we're caring for. One of the ways that I think about stress is akin to inflammation. So when we have inflammation in the body, that's like a physical thing that we can maybe all relate to and connect to. When we have chronic inflammation, we have a sense of the impact that that has for us. Chronic stress operates in the same way, meaning it's a debilitating, draining force, whether we consciously notice it or not.
For many of us in a caregiving role, we have so much of our time and energy directed outwardly that we many times come to the end of the day, we finally hit the bed and we're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea how exhausted I was. Or we come to the end of the week and we have an emotional breakdown, or we get sick ourselves. And because we haven't been so conscious in our moment to moment, we kind of feel like, well, this came out of nowhere. I thought I was managing things just fine. I thought everything was kind of even. And so we get blindsided by the consequences of that tension that is accumulating within us. So mindful pauses within our day can help to relieve some of that stress so that we're not constantly getting to a 10. Maybe we gradually bring that threshold to a 9, to an 8, to a 7.5. Might not seem like a big difference, but can have huge potential over time. So that's one of the things that we're doing here. We're looking to release some of that tension. The second thing is we're allowing for this mini check-in, just a small space to see, how am I doing in this moment? Think about how counter that is from where we spend the majority of our time, which is, how is our loved one doing? What do they need? What's real for them right now? This minute and a half that we took allows us to simply become aware. Am I hurting? Is there tension that's building? Is there emotion that's welling up for me right now? Am I perhaps reaching my limit in terms of the amount of information that I'm taking in? Am I breathing, or am I holding my breath or stunting my breath? It's a very revolutionary thing in the life of a caregiver to attend to oneself, even if just for a minute and a half, and to be aware of, how am I feeling? How am I navigating this moment? Not what I'm capable of doing, because we can all get on that autopilot and just get stuff done. And many times that is exactly what we need to do as caregivers. But this is countering that automated, that default way of operating to a more conscious present, what's really happening for me right now. And that brings us to the third intention of this mindful moment, which is giving us a chance to practice small acts of self-care. Small acts of self-care. What are some examples of that? Okay, so let's say I do that check-in and I notice, gosh, my lower back is really showing up today. It's highlighted. I've got a lot of pressure there. So maybe what I need to do is stretch, extend, 30 seconds of it, 1 minute of it. Doesn't mean I have to stop everything that I'm doing and go do a full yoga practice, but maybe there's some balancing movement that I can take in that moment. Maybe what I notice is I've been speeding through my day. This is a big one for me. I notice that I'm power walking through my day because I got to do this and this and this and this. So maybe what I can do in that moment is simply slow down as I walk to the next room. Maybe what I notice is, there is emotion welling up. It's been a hard set of days. We've gotten some difficult news. There's new information about prognosis, and we're having to deal with that. So can I take 30 seconds or a minute to jot down what I'm feeling? To honor and recognize what I am feeling outside of what's going on with the loved one that I'm caretaking for. Maybe that's not something I have time for. Do I have 30 seconds to allow myself to say, I'm allowed to feel this. This is normal for me to feel this. This doesn't mean I'm weak. This doesn't mean I'm selfish. This is normal. Maybe that's the small act of self-care. Maybe what I noticed in that check-in is I am reaching my limit in terms of mental bandwidth, in terms of what I can take in that day. I can sense it. I can sense the nervousness. I can sense the overwhelmedness. I don't know if that's a word, but I think you guys know what I'm talking about. So maybe the act of self-care that I can take there is perhaps I'm in an appointment and I can ask that provider, can we take a 2-minute break? Or maybe I'm leaving an appointment and there's the rest of the day and maybe there's someone I can call in for a little bit of help. Who can I reach out to that can maybe help me with an errand that I was thinking of running today? Or maybe help me look at the schedule for the rest of the week and see where someone can help me with transportation or groceries. Maybe what I notice in that check-in is that I am indeed holding my breath, which sounds weird to say that we do this so often because of course we need to breathe to survive, but many of us are holding our breath on a regular basis, particularly when we're in heightened moments of stress, right? We clench up just because we're gritting our teeth and bearing it through the moment, and that becomes our norm, and we become less and less aware of that being our norm. So maybe if I notice that my breath is really small, really shallow, like it's hard for me to get a breath in, I give myself 15 seconds of deeper, slower breaths. Not the deepest and slowest, just deeper and slower than where I am right now. Just stretching that breath out a little bit. And then I move forward with my day. So guys, these are just some examples, and I know that what some of you are thinking is what I first thought when this mindful moment practice was presented to me, which is this 1 minute and a half and these small acts of self-care seem so insignificant. They seem so small in relation to this mountain of sadness and fear and stress that I am carrying. How could this possibly make a difference? So I just want to validate that sense, right? And speak to that. What we're counting on here and what we're relying on here is that the power of this practice is in these small mindful bursts adding up. It's the cumulative effect over time of checking in with myself and doing something small that responds to my needs. The cumulative effect is that over time, I'm lowering the baseline of my stress, and I'm actually lowering the threshold, meaning what I'm doing over time is what I experience as this is becoming more of this, something a bit more even and a bit more manageable. The other part of the cumulative effect is I am building gradually this skill of self-awareness, because self-awareness isn't an inherent characteristic, although we might feel like it is for some people. It is a skill, it's a capacity, and it can be learned and developed and nourished. And so we're building that self-awareness so that we can become more conscious of how tension is showing up for us, how it's building, and how we can take action earlier up, further upstream than when I feel I'm about to collapse or I'm burnt out or I just can't do this any longer. Because we know that those are places we can come to as caregivers. So we want to be able to act further upstream. What else are we counting on with this cumulative effect? Is that we're gradually making self-care, self-concern more normal and natural for us. Again, goes back to what I mentioned at the top of this talk, which is balancing an over-concern for the loved one with a little bit more concern for ourselves. We're not necessarily going to even that out. There's no perfect, there's no ideal, but we're trying to get those a little bit more level. So the small things, the small acts of self-care, slowing down the power walking, deep breathing, that seems so, what could they possibly do? They're adding up, and they're also opening the door for maybe medium-sized acts. maybe bigger acts over time, maybe getting to that massage, or maybe getting to that yoga class, or maybe seeking out that therapy or counseling support for myself. We're building up to that. I want to kind of summarize what the practice is about so that this can be something that I'm really hoping you can take with you into your day and experiment with. So we're talking about a mindful moment where you are pausing, stopping what is going on in the moment for 30 seconds, 1 minute, and checking in. How am I feeling in my body? How am I breathing? What's going on in my brain space? Checking in with the full, whole person. Like I mentioned when we were doing the practice, you're not checking in to figure out what's wrong with you. You're not checking in to fix. You are simply checking in with the intention of better knowing how you are navigating the moment. So it's all about awareness. And then you're coupling that mindful moment with a mindful act of self-care, which again, like we talked about, can be very simple, very small, very short. I know that again, in the reality of caregivers, even finding 30 seconds or a minute and a half can feel like, I don't even know how to do that. Even that seems out of reach for me. So here's one tip that I recommend, and it's to look for and identify the organic moments of transition in your day. What do I mean by that? I just finished helping my loved one with a meal and I'm about to go to the bathroom. That's a moment of transition, meaning you've just finished something and you're about to start something else. Take 30 seconds for a check-in there. You just got off the phone with a provider and you're about to go get your loved one ready for an appointment. That is a moment of transition. Use that moment. What we're trying to do here is not feel like we have to all of a sudden carve another to-do list for ourselves, because that's not what we want. We're simply trying to identify the moments that are already happening in our day. These transitions are already taking place, and we're trying to take advantage of those. It doesn't mean that you have to do a mindful moment every transition, but I encourage you to think of one of those a day. Start there, one of those a day. Take my mindful pause, check in with myself, small act of self-care. There might be some days where you don't do it. That's the reality, and that's fine. Have the intention, and maybe next day will be better. Maybe the next day will be a moment where you can bring this practice in. And again, I want to remind and encourage us to be thinking of long term. Yeah, we might do that mindful moment and get a short bit of relief in that second, and that's fantastic. But we're trying to build a sense of relief and calm and serenity and resilience over time, because we're in this caretaking role for the long run, and we want to be able to show up as our best selves. So that's part of what we're doing here. I want to stop there. I know there's just a few of us online right now, but I do want to open up in case there are any questions or comments that come to mind from this mindful pause, mindful moment.
Well, I'll just start. I mean, I think you've had so many powerful suggestions, right? And it's so important to think about this as a mindful moment in transition. I love how you talk about that. And instead of, just sort of mindlessly going from activity to activity and task to task and building up that tension all the while you're doing it without actually using that transition time to kind of slow down. We have the ability to take that pause, but we don't take it. We're usually too much in our heads and thinking about all of the things on the to-do list that we have to accomplish. And when I know I think it's a really useful suggestion to caregivers to think about how to leverage that transitioning time across the activities, because we get a lot of feedback from caregivers who just find, scheduling out some time for some mindfulness, it can be overwhelming in itself. But you're not suggesting that you calendar it down and say, okay, I'm going to practice this at 1 o'clock for 5-6 minutes. You're saying leverage what you can throughout the day, try to cultivate that awareness, check in with yourself and how you're feeling in those moments. And instead of rushing from activity to activity, just to try to leverage those transitions for yourself and check in about how you're feeling. And I think the importance about how that adds up over time is really significant, because that's another overwhelming factor, right? When you don't take that time for yourself, or you just think you have to spend 60 minutes in an exercise class or taking a yoga class, and how that's so not true. If you just begin to regularly engage in these small micro steps, how valuable that really is cumulatively, like you mentioned.
Yeah, Jennifer, I'll just speak to that really quick, which is there's a scaling piece of this, right? So, okay, I managed to do a 1 hour class of yoga once every 3 months, 1 hour in 3 months. And think about these little moments day to day, what that might actually add up to in 3 months, right? In a much more realistic and manageable way. So that's what I like that word leverage, Jennifer, because that is what we're looking to do here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you had also mentioned that this is really revolutionary act, right? To just try to find some of these moments for your own self-care. And we know caregivers are not doing this, right? And it's really impacting their health. And so it's so important to try to find these manageable, practical tools that you can use to help build that awareness and help contribute to improving your health, really.
Right. In all ways, physical, mental, emotional, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to call anyone out, but certainly if there are any other questions, please feel free.
I don't really have a question, but I do like that this is so manageable and practical. And it's not just like, oh, you need to take more time for yourself. It's like, all right, how do I do that? But you've really thought through, how you work these small steps into a busy schedule. So it feels really helpful. I've been taking notes. I'm paying attention, but I'm taking notes.
Thank you, Marcus.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, with that, I think we're wrap up. I'm so grateful to you, Ligia. Thank you so much for sharing these practical tips with us, and for being so generous with your time and your energy to do this for us today, and being flexible as we pivot to keep things moving along. And I really appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jennifer. Again, so honored to be a part of this. So thank you for this opportunity. Thanks so much. And thanks to Jan and Marcus for being here.
Thanks, Ligia.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.